Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we have with us one of the world's most important writers, I think. He is Salman Rushdie, and he's written another novel, the main audience of which is what I would say younger readers. And it's published by Random House, and the title of the book is Luka and the Fire of Life. Great title. Great title. Now, this is the second book that you said you would write so that your sons could read. And the first one was written for Zafar. Yeah. And it's called Harun and the Sea of Stories. Came out 89-90. And the second one, the one we're going to talk about, is written for Milan, who insisted that he also merited a book.
Yes, he did.
Now, are the children happy now at last?
I think they can finally shut up. Yes, it's true. But it's been, I mean, I actually have to thank them because there's no question these books would not have existed if it hadn't been for their insistence. And they have been, I would say, the two most enjoyable writing experiences I've had. So, so I'm grateful to them because they've allowed me to do that.
One of the things you said about this book and about the other book, both of these books, is that your aim is to write a story that demolishes the boundary between adult and children's literature.
Well, I think I'm not the first person to want to do that or indeed to do it. And I think, Miss Rowling is quite good at doing that.
Yes, yeah.
But I think if you go back a little bit, even the great classics like Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass are in many ways very erudite books. And I think Lewis Carroll was a logician and a philosopher and a mathematician, and many of those his higher brow ideas are in there disguised as nonsense. So when you're asked to consider the difference between saying what you mean and meaning what you say, when Alice is asked to, that's of course quite a profound question. So I mean, I think the movies do it all the time these days. There's a whole world of cinema, from Star Wars to Avatar, all the Pixar movies, a whole range of films, where the Indiana Jones films, etc., where you just don't ask yourself if they're for grown-ups or children. Everybody goes to see them.
And enjoys.
And I think actually right now, this in books, this place between late childhood and early adulthood, some of the most interesting writing is being put in that place, like Philip Pullman's books, for example.
Yes.
Golden Compass, etc.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's a good place to put it because one of the things that most pleased me about what happened with Harun and the Sea of Stories was that exactly this, what I hoped for happened, which is that grown-ups came to that book and found in it one kind of satisfaction, and younger readers came to it and found another kind of satisfaction. And so I thought,
they saw all sorts of things that the adults didn't see.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I thought I'd try and do that again.
The other thing is, Luka is not to be considered, you say, a sequel to Harun, but a companion.
Well, it's the same family. It's a story happening to the same family. But I wanted not to go back where I'd been. I thought I don't want to return to the Sea of Stories. And again, you see, I mean, I love those two Alice books very much and think of them as guidelines. And I thought it was very interesting that when Lewis Carroll wrote the second Alice book, he did not return to Wonderland. He found another magic world to go to. And I thought that's a good guideline. Try and do that. Find another place to go and another reason for going there.
Now, here's one thing you said about this book, I guess, or maybe the two of them, that I didn't quite understand, that you think of them as a message in a bottle.
Well, in the sense that I thought that my sons, reading them as children, reading them at the ages of 11, 12, 13, would read them in one way, and then grow up and read them as adults and see them as a different book, And I think with Harun and the Sea of Stories, that really happened with my older son, Zafar, who read it it came out when he was 11 and a half, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he read it as a children's book and enjoyed it very much. And now he's read it as an adult. He's now 31. and still loves it, but loves it in a different way. He sees different things in it now, and so that's what I meant. That I thought it's for the same child at two ages, if you like.
Is it okay if you're an adult and you just fall totally in love with the story and
Yes.
you race and race and race? Because that was my reaction. I just love the story.
Well, I think we're all 12 years old, really.
Well, that gives me hope.
Yeah, and I think the one of the things that anybody who loves books loves is the joy of pure story.
Yes.
And as a writer, it's wonderful to get a chance to do that. To write books which are stripped down more or less to pure storytelling. And these two books have been, for me, the two times I've had a chance to do that.
I had the feeling on almost every page that you were having a heck of a good time writing this book.
No, I was having a ball, and I just hope it communicates, because it was very, very enjoyable.
Luka and the Fire of Life is, in a way, a story of father and son. And it's time to meet the father when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Luka and the Fire of Life by Salman Rushdie. That's what we're talking about today, a book published by Random House. And before we get into any more, aspects of the book, I think it's time, believe it or not, to read from a press release so that people get an idea of what the book is all about. A thrilling, delightful, lyrically crafted fable for the young and young at heart, Luka's adventures begins one beautiful starry night in the land of Aleph Bay, where a terrible thing happens. Luka's father, Rashid, the legendary storyteller of Kahani, falls suddenly and inexplicably into a sleep so deep that nothing and no one can rouse him. To save him from slipping away entirely, Luka must embark on a journey through the world of magic with his loyal companions, Bear the dog and Dog the bear.
Indeed.
Wonderful folks. Together, they encounter a slew of fantastical creatures, lots of beasties, as I call them, strange allies, and challenging obstacles, all in the hopes of stealing the Fire of Life, a seemingly impossible and exceedingly treacherous task, but one that must be done in order to save Luka's father's life. So that's the essence of the story.
Yeah, it is, and I'm glad you mentioned the beasties, because it's a very animal book. Of all my books, I think it's the one with the most animal creatures in it.
Oh, they're all over the place.
As you mentioned,
one of the things you seem to like animals that fly.
Oh yes,
and if in their quote natural state they don't fly, you put them in a magic state and they fly.
They get on a magic carpet, which is available in this book. It's not been available in my previous work. But there's also there's some bad animals too. You mentioned some good animals. The dog called Bear, the bear called Dog. And there's another. There's a helpful, and I guess wily coyote at one point.
Yes.
Who helps with the theft of the fire. But there's some very bad animals. There's, for instance, Luka has to pass through a land of extremely easily offended and thin-skinned rats.
Yes.
And it just seems to me that we live in an age of easily offended and thin-skinned rats, and that the correct reply,
political point made.
Yeah, and the correct reply to them is actually the one made in the book, which is abuse and itching powder, which destroys them.
Very, very effective itching powder, I might add.
On thin-skinned rats, very effective.
It's a very good thing to use. Now, getting back to Dad. Dad essentially is a storyteller.
Yes.
And one of the underlying questions of the book, I think, is how important in society is the storyteller? And that's a very important question for our time.
Yes, indeed.
Given all the electronic stuff that's going on.
Well, if the book has a message, if the book has anything as crude as a message, it would be to try and remind its readers how important to human life the telling and receiving of stories has been and is. There's a moment in the book when Luka, in a kind of slip of the tongue, refers to something as only a story.
Yes.
And he's told off, in fact, by the character of this sort of angel of death character called Nobo Daddy. He's told that, you of all people, you're a storyteller's son, you should know that nothing is only a story. And he uses this phrase, he says, man alone is the storytelling animal. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. In this book full of animals, man is the storytelling animal.
Man is the storyteller.
And it is true that we are the only creature on the earth that does this. And therefore it's somewhere very close to the heart of our nature. It's what we are. We are this creature that tells stories. And
now,
it's very...
Luka somehow, I think, grasps that. Because the other thing that goes on throughout the story is that Luka's answer to the question, how important is his father, is that he's so important to me that I'll give my life up for him, if that's what it takes.
And I think that's the love story that's at the heart of the book, is the question of the love between fathers and sons, between parents and children, and exactly that, how much both sides are willing to risk in the name of that love. It's a non-Oedipal story. Often children try to kill their parents in literature. In this book, the boys actually try to do the opposite.
Goodness sake. Now, I want to stop and read from the book. And the reason I want to do what I wrote down is because it's so good.
Thank you.
It's so good. This is the opening of Chapter 5, The Paths to the Three Fiery Donuts. If you have not yet flown on a magic carpet, you probably don't know about the seasickness. A flying carpet makes a slow, rolling, wave-like movement as it passes through the air, not exactly as if it's floating on airways, but more as if the carpet itself has become a kind of silken air that can bear you aloft and take you wherever you want to go. It's sad but true that your stomach may find this kind of travel disagreeable, at least for a while. And if you have never flown on a flying carpet accompanied by a nervous talking bear, an even more nervous talking dog, and an elephant duck and an elephant drake, there are some of those characters, making the first flight of their otherwise flightless lives, to say nothing of a supernatural being who looks, acts, and talks like your own father, as well as an ancient queen who looks, acts, and talks like a 17-year-old girl, and in addition, a large amphibian boat tank named Argo, well, then you will just have to imagine the confusion that reigned aboard the green and gold Resham as it took off to begin its journey toward the mists of time. The flying carpet had grown considerably in size to accommodate all its passengers and cargo, and this exaggerated the waviness of the flight. And I kept thinking as I read passages like that, where are the illustrations? I'd like to see a really talented illustrator get on this and
well, we did it with Haroun and the Sea of Stories. We initially published it, just as a straight chapter book, and later on there was an illustrated edition. So maybe we'll be able to do an illustrated edition for this down the line.
Oh, I think it cries for it. I mean, I can't draw a lick, but I kept saying I should have a pencil. I should be trying, and anybody who wants to go flying around on a magic carpet, now has a sense of what it's really like.
Well, I think that's the thing. If you're going to do something as eccentric as allowing people to fly, you have to take it seriously. Would you get seasick? If you went high up in the air, would it be cold? What do you do? I mean, all those questions which I think spring to mind, you need to answer.
Something about you, intrigue seems to follow you about. And is intrigue present now? I think we may find out when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. He's talking about Luka and the Fire of Life with its author, Salman Rushdie. And a UK publication, a newspaper, The Independent, said in part, this book has elements that are marvelously original, such as a land a land of decommissioned gods. I had almost forgotten them. And there are moments that are startlingly beautiful, both for the richness of the imagining and the crafting of some of the prose. The rhythm and the tone are mostly familiar with Haroun, and like Haroun, too, this is not quite a children's book, or at least not the kind whose readership is of an obvious age to read it for themselves. It is too young or too old. But that's really, it describes a great book.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
But parents who are keen on reading aloud to their children will take great pleasure in the tale and its telling, and will find this fable, like its predecessor, an eloquent example of the games a fine storyteller can play. And that's what I started out with. I said you had a lot of fun doing this. And part of the fun, I think, comes in the names that you have assigned to people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is somebody, and I'm probably not going to pronounce this correctly, Nobodaddy?
Nobodaddy. Nobodaddy is kind of the angel of death. He's the nobody who's going to suck out the life of Luka's dad. And I have to say, just to be completely, to full disclosure, I didn't make up that name. It's stolen from William Blake.
Oh, okay.
And in Blake, it's a name for God. Blake actually has a poem called To Nobodaddy, which is a complaint about the absent father, if you like.
Oh my gosh!
Where are you?
Yeah.
I ask you questions you never answer.
Yeah.
You never show up. And it's Blake's complaint against God as an absentee dad. So I stole it from there. But in this book, it's not really a figure of God. It's more a figure of death, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Now, there's a place mentioned in the book several times, not a place that Luka goes to, but I was amused by the names Sniffelheim.
Sniffelheim, yes,
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's a in Nordic mythology there's a place called Niflheim.
Uh-huh.
There are various around Middle Earth, around Midgard. There are all these different lands where various beasts roam, and one of them is Niflheim.
And then there's an animal called Slippy, who is an 8-legged wonder horse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, don't we all need one of those?
I think every book like this
Two legs
should,
in each corner, if anybody's wondering.
And then there's a trio, very important trio, Johua, Johai, Joiga.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are the lords of time, the past, the present, and the future. And Rashid, the storyteller, and therefore his son Luka, has a quarrel with them.
Yes.
Because his view is that, their idea of time is sort of metronomic, rigid, the march of the seconds and the minutes and the hours. And Rashid says that their idea of time is like a prison that we're all trapped in. But he suggests that our lived experience of time is not like that.
No, it's not.
You fall in love, time stands still. You're excited, time seems to move very fast. You're bored, it seems to move very, very painfully. Sometimes things seem to repeat themselves. Some people never grow up and seem to live the same time over and over again. So I think our lived experience of time, and Rashid suggests to his son, is this much more fluid, flexible, interesting, almost creative experience of time. And the Time Lords who tell us it just goes tick-tock, 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 they are the enemy. And they are the enemy of the story. And so they're Rashid's enemies.
Yeah. There are animal characters who come to Luka's aid throughout the story. I think one of the last ones is a squirrel by the name of Ratatat.
Yes, Ratatat. Yes.
Tell us.
Well, there are,
You have to pause before mentioning every character you put in this book to have a shot at saying it correctly.
Well, the squirrel is a spy, really. Let's say his main female aide is the princess of the land of Art, which stands for over the top. She's a rather rude princess, so instead of being called the Sultana, she's known as the Insultana. But anyway, she has agents, secret agents, inside the world, the heart of magic, which Luka needs to penetrate in order to achieve his quest.
Correct.
And one of them is this squirrel. The squirrel is her sleeper. He's an agent. He's an agent of good, lurking in the heart of magic. He's a spy.
See, this is why I love the book. It's such a wonderful blending of myth and reality. It really it's a super book. And it says here on the press release, the celebration of storytelling from Kirkus. This is a possible prequel to the book Rushdie is said to be writing about his own enforced slumber. Is it?
Well, that is the book I'm writing next, but I don't know that this is a prequel to it. I'm going to write a memoir finally
about that.
Period. Well, it's that was the initial impulse, but I've rapidly came to feel that in order to tell the story of those 10 years, I have to tell the whole story. So it's really more like an autobiography than just a memoir of that moment.
Yes. Well, don't wait until you finish that before you come back.
Thank you.
I hope there'll be something else. It's a great book. You should all go out and buy 2 copies, one for you and one for the child in your life. It's called Luka and the Fire of Life, a novel by Salman Rushdie. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.